I'm Lily.
And I'm Sophie.
And welcome to the Keeping Tabs podcast hosted by the Princeton Public Library's Teen Advisory Board.
We interview authors to learn more about the writing process.
Today we are here with Lamar Giles, the Edgar Award-nominated author of the young adult thriller novels Fake ID, Endangered, Overturned, and Spin. He has also written the young adult contemporary novel Not So Pure and Simple, the young adult horror novel The Getaway, and the A Legendary Alston Boys Adventure middle grade series. Lamar Giles is also the editor of the young adult short story collection Fresh Ink, and he is a founding member of the nonprofit We Need Diverse Books. So hello, it is so amazing to have you on the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
All right, so we're just going to jump right into it. The concepts of your book immediately grab readers' attention because they're so unique. How do you come up with a unique and a memorable story to grab readers of every age?
Well, I think some of the best ideas I get are really more like 2 or 3 ideas, like things that don't necessarily go together, but I can form a connection in my head and then try to make something work. An example would be my novel Fake ID, which for people who don't know, Fake ID is about a young man in witness protection. His family's moved to his 4th town in 4 years. He makes one friend. That friend gets murdered. When he starts to look into it, he thinks his own father may be involved. And the idea of a teenager whose family's in witness protection came to me because I was reading a book about witness protection from the man who created it. And at the same time, I was thinking about where I grew up, a town called Hopewell, Virginia, which is right next to an Army base. And I was thinking about how all throughout school, we would see kids come and go as their parents got different orders, whether they're getting orders to come to Fort Lee or getting orders to go somewhere else. And it occurred to me while reading this witness protection book, like, hey, if you're the kid of a family that's bouncing around and doing these different identities because your parents can't behave, you moving from town to town isn't dissimilar from military children. The difference being that, at least for the military kids, they can say their parents are doing something honorable. And that idea just stuck. And from that point on, I was able to spin out a whole novel. And a lot of times the books, the ideas will be something like a thing that doesn't necessarily go together with this other thing I find interesting. Smash it together and we get magic.
Yes, you definitely do get magic. Fake ID, I had never heard of a book where the main character was in the witness protection program. So I was so curious to hear like the story behind that concept. Yeah, it's truly brilliant. And also, of course, not only are the concepts of your novels amazing, but your books are also incredibly compelling. I am pulled into your stories from the very first page. So how do you craft an engaging hook for your novels? And then how do you maintain that excitement throughout your novels so that readers can't put your books down?
Well, thank you for saying that. It's something that I work really hard to try to keep you engaged when you read things. And what I have found is very effective is to sort of start in a place that most readers probably wouldn't find themselves in. So automatically there's some interest. Like in my novel Overturned, the idea of going to pick up your wrongfully convicted father from prison. Or in my novel Spin, where you start out being interrogated for a friend's murder that you didn't commit. Like most people will not have been in those situations. So automatically there's a little bit of tension. And then it becomes a matter of sort of posing questions and parsing out answers periodically. I always say a thing I hate, and I'll use a TV show, for example. When I used to watch a show like Lost, I don't know if you all remember Lost or not, but it was very good at posing questions, but then it took a long time to answer them if they got answered at all. So my whole thing is I try to give you questions, give you some answers while also posing new questions and try to repeat that throughout the book. And I have found that's a great way to sort of keep people engaged. It's very much wash, rinse, and repeat if you can pull it off.
I love you compared it to Lost because I loved Lost, especially in the middle of quarantine when I was, stuck in my room and really looking for something to pull me in and want to keep going, if that makes sense. And what I think is so magnetic about your books is that, like you said, you answer some questions and leave some waiting to be found towards the end of the book, which makes it impossible to put down, which is a great way of putting it.
Thank you.
So how do you pace your plots so that they're action-packed without making readers feel like they're rushing through a story?
Well, I think a lot of times when it feels action packed, what you get is kind of knowing when to break away. And what I mean is like there's certain action scenes that you start, and I think you kind of got to see through to the end, like no breaks, like a car chase. You start a car chase, it doesn't make sense to break it in the middle, go off and do something else for 30 pages, and then come back to the exact same point in the car chase. However, take something like a thriller where, say, there's a serial killer stalking someone through a house, and your protagonist hides from in the closet. That's maybe a good point to break away and go do something else that can move the plot along. And it's sort of the difference between like in your face action and sustained suspense. And I think what I try to do is mix that up in every book and give you some action beats where I got to break away, give you some plot information, but also give you some action that's really satisfying in one fell swoop. And by kind of mixing that up and not doing it the same way every book, it still achieves the effect of giving you that fast feeling without like making you want to put the book down because it's driving you nuts.
Yes, I didn't even realize that like about your books, but when you talked about it, I'm realizing yes, you do a great job of like breaking up the action so that you leave readers needing to keep reading, but then also giving people like satisfying chunks of action as well. And it's just I'm so enlightened more about as to why your books are like so exciting to read. So thank you for telling us about that.
Oh, no problem.
And our next question for you is that your main characters all have distinct voices and unique perspectives on the world, and these perspectives have a major impact on the way in which they tell the story. For example, Nick in Fake ID is the son of a criminal, so he battles the villains in the novel in a way that only he could. How do you write narration from the perspective of a character in a way that feels authentic and unique to their specific life experience?
So I think this is actually a thing that just comes with years and years and years of practice. It's a skill I've had to hone since I was a kid. And to give you an example, Nick from Fake ID, who's the son of criminals, so he approaches things with the knowledge of crime that other characters may not have. And the way I think about it is, if I was to take Nick, I could drop him in any other book I wrote and get a completely different book because I know him so well. And I could have him solve the mystery in Endangered. I could have him solve the mystery in Overturned, solve the one in Spin. And at the same time, I could put each of those main characters in the Fake ID. It wouldn't be Fake ID at that point because they wouldn't be in the witness protection program. But I could generate a mystery where they would use their skills. And I think it's a matter of giving the character an interesting skill set and history and just knowing you got to be true to that. Nick isn't going to think the same way as Fuse and Kaya and Spin and vice versa. But once I have that character, it feels as set as gravity to me. I don't know how to veer away, but that's just after years and years and years of this. I often compare what I do to a basketball player practicing free throws. It seems like a skill that's not as exciting as everything else, but by putting in those repetitions when it's time to work, you can kind of zone out and do it automatically.
That is so like truly brilliant. Thinking about how if any of your characters were dropped into any of the other stories, you'd have a completely different book. That is such a hard skill to have as an author, and I think you have that skill. Like that's so cool to hear you say that because yeah, it's definitely true.
On the topic of your characters and their uniqueness and how they have such a distinct voice that carries through all of your novels, their inner monologues are very clever and witty and funny. How do you write a sort of narration that will make your readers laugh?
So that part is probably the part that's closest to my own inner voice because I'm often thinking of the funny version of any situation I'm in, or I'm thinking of an exaggerated version. The example I was posting about this today, I have a 2 year old, and occasionally we'll watch Bluey. Do you know Bluey? So, Bluey's for those who don't know, it's a children's cartoon about a family of dogs. And every episode, Bluey is the 6 year old. Her sister Bingo's 4 years old, and they tend to play games with their friends and their family. And I watch this a lot with my daughter. And in watching it so much, I started to imagine a gritty adult version where Bluey and Bingo are like grizzled police veterans solving a murder in Australia, and I was calling it Blue Detective in my mind. And so that's it's not anything that necessarily works in reality, but I think about stuff like that all the time. So when it's time to give my characters funnier sides, I'm often digging into these memories of things I've thought about around my family, my friends, my daughter, and somehow I can work it into a conversation between characters. The best example would be in Spin when Kaya and Fuse are starting to gain affection for each other and they're texting each other at night. They start to talk about Captain Crunch's real name or real first name. But like that's just something I thought about a lot for some reason at some point in time. And it just presented an opportunity to drop it in. So I'm really giving you glimpses into my own personal thought processes when we're doing the funny stuff. And it's not that I think I'm super funny, but it's like it's things in my head that like it doesn't make sense anywhere else but in this particular paragraph.
I love that. And also, yes, you are super funny. I think it's safe to say, like, if you can make someone laugh just from looking at like a piece of paper, I think that's a very good skill to have.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. And also, while your characters are like funny and complex, they also develop over the course of their stories. So, how do you write realistic character development that leaves readers feeling even more endeared to your main characters than they were at the beginning of the story?
Well, this is probably the most traditional part of storytelling that I do. And this has been hammered into me over years of reading craft books, taking classes, meeting writing teachers. The idea that a character that changes is a more interesting character than a character that stays flat. And so, in order to accomplish that, the way I tend to think is I think of like a really solid trait about that character in the beginning. And then I think about what's that supposed to look like at the end. This is before I have any real story. An example would be Not So Pure and Simple, Dell, who Dell is sort of is this kind of mild sexist and misogynist in the beginning of the book, but doesn't really know it. And the idea being that by the end of the book, he should be at least 80% reformed. He's not perfect. He's still got some work to do. And so having those traits in mind, it allowed me to say, okay, if he starts out this way and he's supposed to end up this way, then I just need to figure out the events that make those shifts in him. And that's typically how I think about all the characters when I'm not even really sure where the story's going yet. I'm like, this is what I want them to be at the end. And then the trick becomes to not say it outright, at least for as long as I can hold off. There comes a point where you probably have to state your intention, but I feel like if I can get around it with just circumstances, character interactions, setting for as long as possible, it it's going to feel better for the reader and accomplish that goal.
So, as you talk about having a realistic character and having a character driven novel, how do you have a book that balances something that is plot driven and character driven? Because having a realistic character and having an engaging plot and progressing that are both important, and your books seem to have a very good balance of both.
Well, this is actually a really neat, I'm not going to call it a trick, but it's a really neat craft way of thinking that a writing teacher I knew taught me a few years ago. Her name's Janet Perry. She used to teach at Old Dominion University in Norfolk. And she gave us this acronym, FAT, which stands for feelings, action, and thought. And the idea is that you need to have them all to have a complete story, but you can never stay in one place too long. And so if you're writing about feelings, at some point you need to get into action or thought. You don't have to do them in that order. But if you go to thought, you eventually got to come back to action. And then you need to go to more thought and then maybe some feeling. And it's sort of in my head, what I see is sort of like this radio wave modulation, this up and down, where I'm spending time in each of these sectors for a little bit. And by being able to kind of visualize it that way, I can now feel like I'm spending too much time on character. I got to get the plot moving. I'm spending too much time on plot. We haven't talked to Dell or Kiara or Jameer in a while. Or I'm spending too much time here. I need to describe the setting to you. I need to tell you what kind of weather we're having, what it smells like out there. And by knowing that I can never stay in one place too long, I'm forced to like shift up the rhythms. And I think that's what helps get you to the balance of the plot and character.
I loved hearing you talk about it as being kind of like a fluid motion in terms of you moving from one thing to the other. Because reading your books, the reading process is very fluid too. Like, I feel like you just get so pulled in that you're just going to all these different places and you're going along with what the character's thinking and feeling and doing. And it's really cool to hear you say that you don't stay in one place too long, because as a reader, it feels like you stay in every single place for like the exact perfect amount of time. So that was really cool to hear about.
And I'll expound on that a little bit because I don't want to make it seem like I'm nailing this stuff in the first draft. Like the versions you're reading are probably like the fifth draft. So the first draft, that stuff's not really very polished at all. And it's through the revision process that I get that really good balance. So I just wanted to put that out there for anyone who's writing and they're like, wow, when I write, I can't get that to work. I can't get it to work either in the first draft. It's through a lot of rewriting to get to that point.
Yes, that is comforting to hear as someone who likes to write as well, that the revising process is what makes everything work even smoother.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to talk about Not So Pure and Simple some more, because I love Not So Pure and Simple because it was packed with so many important life lessons for teen boys about how to be respectful of women. And not only are those life lessons important, but they were woven into the story in an organic and powerful way. So it didn't feel like it was just like, someone screaming this one theme at you over and over. It felt like it was a very organic progression with Dell and his character development. So, how do you incorporate important themes into your stories in a way that feels natural?
Well, I never wanted to come off like message. Like I don't ever want it to sound like I'm screaming at you, like you mentioned. And the way I found, particularly in Not So Pure and Simple, that was really effective was to cover it with humor. I think that's one of my funnier books. I think Dale has a lot of really like laugh out loud moments that are crafted on purpose because as he's going through that, I'm trying to accomplish a couple of things. One thing is when you see someone doing something where they're sort of flailing, but it's also funny, you may sympathize with them because we've all been in those situations. And the thing I'm trying to get to and Not So Pure and Simple is society sort of made it possible for these quote unquote nice guys who are really misogynist and sexist to sort of get away with what they do. There's been so much in media and how we teach people over decades and decades that a lot of what Dell does in the beginning, I would imagine people may feel a little bit iffy about, but like, hey, he's just a guy trying to figure it out. And I'm trying to get you to the point where you recognize like we've all internalized this stuff. But there comes a turn when Dale starts to go a little too far. And if I've done my job and covered it up with humor to the point when you're on his side a little bit, when you start to see that turn, you start to recognize, hey, the stuff he was doing in the beginning wasn't all right either. We just all have like brushed it under the carpet for so long. And it's that balance of humor to get to the actual point I'm trying to make that I think helps the theme come through. It's not something I'm shouting at you, but something you discover along with Dell as he discovers himself.
Yes, you accomplished that so well. Because as a teen girl reading the book, I was like, I can tell, I can see where this is going, but I could see a teen boy reading it and being like, oh, this is kind of okay. And even I liked Dell as a character. I was sympathizing with him because of the humor and because I just liked kind of the way his mind worked. But yeah, that was a very, like, I still got on his side, even though I could see down the line that this was going to become a problem. So
Yeah,
it was pulled off very like smoothly. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
I also love that you took the time to incorporate into your books and make it such a strong point, because I think like even in school and like in conversation, it's not something that's discussed so plainly and casually, which I think is really important. And it's great to see someone who's so willingly incorporating it into such a positive way into their novels.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So you've written from many different genres, including thriller, horror, realistic fiction. How does the writing process for your thriller and horror books such as The Getaway or Overturned compared to the writing process for your realistic fiction book, Not So Pure and Simple?
Well, I have found that writing horror and thrillers is a tiny bit easier than writing realistic fiction. The reason being in a horror thriller, particularly when you're dealing with like a murder or conspiracy, it's easy to kind of cut to is the killer nearby? That sort of thing to keep things moving and to push plot. Whereas in a realistic fiction like Not So Pure and Simple, I don't have that sort of like comfort. I have to deal with just the relationships, the circumstances of the small town's politics, their religious views. And I found that was a harder thing to juggle because it's easy to just keep you going. I mean, I don't want to say it's easy. I've done enough mysteries where I know I can keep you hooked if I threaten danger. But the threat of mortal danger is not the same as the threat of Dell's going to be embarrassed. So the stakes are lower, but I still need to make them feel high to keep you engaged. And that's a tricky thing. So I find that the horror and thrillers, I've learned enough technique where I can breeze through some of that easier. But that's why I really appreciated the experience of writing Not So Pure and Simple, because I went into it with the idea that I was going to test myself and not just lean on the things I knew I was good at.
Yes, that I'm glad that you tested yourself because I love Not So Pure and Simple. And it was, to me, it was just as compelling as your mystery thriller books of yours that I've read. So, yeah, very good. And you also have a middle grade sci-fi mystery adventure series, which is the legendary Alston Boys Adventure series. How does writing a middle grade series compare to writing a young adult standalone?
Well, I would say this with the Austin Boys. For me, when I write those books, I'm sort of giving myself a break from some of the heavier stuff I write about in the young adult books. And so for me, the experience of writing middle grade was really like very fun and returning to a childlike feeling of wonder I remember from when I used to read kind of funny fantasy books at a very young age. So I'm sort of like giving myself permission to have a little more fun and be a little more humorous than I often allow myself to do in the YA. And often I'm working on several projects at once. So when I was writing Austin Boys, often I think there's three books in the series. I think through each of the books I was working on something young adult. So I think on the first Austin Boys book I was probably writing Spin and Not So Pure and Simple. And then with the second and third Austin Boys books I was writing The Getaway. And so it was nice, however I broke the day up to deal with this heavy stuff in the morning and the fun stuff in the afternoon or vice versa.
I love that. That sounds like a fun time. Maybe I should start writing two books at once.
I love that. And I love your everything, how you phrase all of your answers. I think it's a great outlook on writing, especially knowing Lily and I, who are both interested in that. So we really appreciate your answers and your advice.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely, definitely. I love the help.
Great. Can you tell us about any upcoming projects you're working on?
Sure. Well, so I have some stuff coming out that I guess technically that's done. It's a spin-off of the Austin Boys series called Epic Ellisons Cosmos Camp. That's coming out in May 9th, I think. And so that was a fun book to write because it deals with the Austin Boys as rivals, the Epic Ellisons, who have appeared in each of the Austin Boys books and now get their own adventure. So that was fun. In November, I have a graphic novel from DC Comics coming out called Static Up All Night. And so I get to write the superhero a lot of people know as Static Shock. His name is actually Static. He had a TV show many years ago. It's on HBO now if anybody wants to watch. But I got a chance to play it in the DC Comics sandbox. And I'm also working on a new horror novel that I can't talk about much yet. I hope to be able to talk about it in the next few months, but I'm working on the second draft now. So as I said before, the first draft was a mess. Second draft is starting to make a lot more sense. So for any of you writers out there, just know I go through it too.
I'm going to be reloading your Goodreads page to see any more new information about the horror novel because I'm very excited to hear you say that. And I'm also very excited to look at your other projects too, like the DC one and the Epic Ellisons as well. That's very exciting.
Oh, thank you.
And those are all of our questions for you. So, do you want to plug anything, like any books you're reading that you're liking, your social media, anything else before we stop recording?
Oh, hold on. I'm gonna reach for something. I'm gonna show real quick.
Yes, of course.
I just got this in the mail. The Library of Broken Worlds by Elia Don Johnson. And so I haven't had a chance to crack this open yet, but someone I really trust sent me a copy. It's a fantasy novel. I'm really looking forward to that. And I've just been reading my normal batch of comic books. I've been reading a book from DC Comics called Superman Lost, which has been pretty fun. And I've been listening to, okay, I'm blanking now. I have to pull up my phone. Um, I've been listening to, I always have like three things going.
Me too.
Oh, I've been listening to How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix.
Ooh, is it good? I keep like looking at it in the bookstore and being like, should I read that?
I'm like two chapters in and it's starting out very compelling. I like Grady Hendrix's stuff, so I'm anticipating a fun read.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing your reading list with us because now I'm gonna pick up Grady Hendrix.
Oh, definitely. I hope you enjoy. I love recommending stuff.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And do you want to plug your social media
Oh
before?
yeah, sure. I'm at LR Giles on Twitter and I'm Lamar Giles, one word, on Instagram.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank you.
podcast.
It was
Hey,
Yes.
so
no,
nice
thank you
to
for
meet
having
you.
me. Thank you for
Oh, of
having me. It's good to
course.
meet you too. The questions were awesome.
Thank you
Good.
so much. Yes, we wanted to make sure we could reflect your brilliance in our questions. Yeah.
Well,
Oh
you
my.
two have a great day and a great spring, and hopefully we can sit down and chat again soon.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you so much.
That concludes today's interview with Lamar Giles. I loved hearing him talk about how you could put any of his narrators into any of his books and you would have a completely different story because each of his narrators' voices is so unique. I also loved hearing him talk about how he writes his books so that the characters are spending time in feelings, actions, and thought, and he has the characters shift between the three so that his books are very fluid and fast paced while still being completely multi-dimensional. I also loved hearing him talk about how he writes his middle grade books at the same time as he writes his young adult thriller and horror books, and that helps him to kind of have some joy with his middle grade books while he's writing about these heavier topics in his young adult books. I also loved hearing him talk about his upcoming releases, the Epic Ellisons book and the book with DC, and I will be linking down below the places where you can pre-order those books so that you can receive them when they come out if you would like to read them. I will also link to all of Lamar Giles' social media and places where you can buy his books and places where you can check out his books at the library. Feel free to follow us on social media too. Our Instagram is at keeping.tabs.podcast. Our TikTok is at keepingtabspodcast. And our YouTube is Keeping Tabs Podcast. And you can also follow us on Spotify, rate us on Spotify, or leave a review of us and a rating of us on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we will see you soon with a new one. Bye!